it could be through strangers met along the way who are surprisingly, unexpectedly filled with that same fire. And it could be you, because you never know when or where or through whom the Spirit will speak, or where or through whom justice will flow into the world like water. You never know when or where or through whom the good news of God's love will break out. Sometimes we think it's all up to us. We think that overcoming injustice, healing the world, making a difference is all up to us, up to me or you or all of us right here in this church community, and we feel inadequate to the task, overwhelmed, hopeless. We look back to people like Martin Luther King Jr. or even Rosa Parks now, whose names we know, and see heroic figures who shouldered the burden of history all on their own. We forget that they didn't act alone. We forget about all of the people around them, those who trained them and supported them, and all the people before them who struggled in the shadows for decades, who remain unknown to us, yet whose voices and actions and lives kept hope alive and carried the light of love and justice forward until we could finally all see it shine bright again. Sometimes, too, we think it's all up to someone else. We think we have no voice, no calling, no chance whatsoever of making a difference in the face of the daunting problems and systemic injustices of our society. So we decide to wait for the right leader, or the right twist of fate, or the will of God, or progress, or whatever, something to come along and make change happen. Sidney White Crawford points out that the book of Esther had difficulty gaining canonical status in the scriptures in both Jewish and Christian traditions, mainly because, if you pay attention, it lacks religious elements. There are no prayers or sacrifices mentioned, no mention of Jerusalem or the temple. Neither Esther or Mordecai seems to follow Jewish law. Esther is married to a Gentile and eats non-kosher food and seems to be thoroughly assimilated into the Persian world. Most striking of all, she writes, God is not even mentioned in the book. God, though unseen and unacknowledged, works through human instruments to ensure the survival of the chosen people. In the book of Esther, Dr. Crawford writes, human action is the key to achieving God's purpose in the world. You see, we forget that Esther and Mary of Nazareth and Rosa Parks were relatively powerless women in their time, that Moses was a fugitive on the run when God called him, that John and Jesus were inconsequential local religious leaders in a faraway corner of the mighty Roman Empire. We forget they were people like us who simply responded to a call deep within them. And we forget that none of them acted alone. All of them depended on others, worked alongside others, created community with others, and called others to the work of God's love and justice and peace. Would that all God's people were prophets, cried Moses. If only all God's people were prophets and God's Spirit poured through all of them. One of the striking and wonderful things about this church, to me, is the way that so many of you let Spirit speak through you, justice flow through you, and God's love live in you. You don't wait for me to be God's prophet, thank goodness. I usually have to try to keep up with you as we seek together to be God's prophetic community in so many ways, showing hospitality to one another and to strangers, even undocumented ones, giving away money in a society consumed with making money, serving those who are struggling with homelessness or hunger, welcoming children and honoring the wisdom of youth, caring for those who are sick or alone in our church, and calling for health care for all in our society, crying out for peace, women's rights, LGBT rights, for protecting the earth, and so many other things. Some of you sometimes risking ridicule or even arrest along the way. And none of us do all of these things, but many of us do some of these things and follow your passion in sharing the Spirit in your lives by staying kind, and full of hope when all the world around us seems to be losing it, abandoning kindness and losing hope. The truth is, none of us can do this work alone. None of us are called to do this work alone. Yet all of us are called. All of us are called to let the Spirit speak through us in some way, to let justice flow through us in some way, to let the good news of God's unbounded love break out in us